evening, everyone. My name is Jessica Jones, and I am the director for the Berks County Area Agency on Aging. Welcome to Aging Matters. I am your host this month. Um, I have a special guest today. Her name is Rebecca May Cole, and I want to introduce her. She's going to talk to us about a really important topic, something that not everyone often thinks about, and how it can impact your life as you are aging. And it is actually ageism. And I want to talk to her and have a bunch of questions for you, Rebecca, around how this is going to impact individuals' lives and things to think about when they're dealing with family, friends, older adults, aunts, uncles, grandparents. So go ahead, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about ageism.
Thanks, Jess. Happy to be here. Really appreciate this opportunity because ageism is a very important topic that we will talk about. But my name is Rebecca May Cole. I'm the executive director of the Pennsylvania Association of Area Agencies on Aging. There are 52 area agencies on aging, or we call them AAAs to be short. And they cover the entire Commonwealth, all 67 counties, but there are 52 of them. And they're really kind of the front door of access for older adults and family members to gain access to services, which, of course, as you well know, and AAAs do a lot of great things for their communities, like this program today and many other programs that you offer in Berks County yourself. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit going into our specific topic today? Tell our viewers a little bit about what ageism is and if it actually does it differ? Is it the same as being ageist? And kind of what is the connotation around ageism and just really get them to understand what we're talking about here today.
Sure. Well, ageism really is a form of discrimination, like many other kinds of isms. It's something that is not very recognized as a society, and it's something that we've all been raised with for many, many generations, even. So, ageism really is that form of discrimination. It's based on negative assumptions that we make about aging. And ageism can happen at any point in life when somebody is younger and maybe in a professional role and they look younger. Sometimes people will experience ageism because people think, well, you couldn't possibly be old enough to do XYZ.
Oh, so wow. So it's not just for older adults necessarily. Okay.
No, definitely not. And I think a lot of younger folks do experience ageism, especially in the beginning of their careers, because people look at them and think, or say, I mean, sometimes say, and that's something that's interesting about ageism is people have no issue saying some of the things that we'll be talking about today. And that's something that I would really like to see come out of this is for people to really think about some of the words that we use and think about them a little bit different so that the next time you hear some of the things that we'll talk about, you'll think, oh, that's an example of ageism, and maybe I could talk about it a little bit. So yes, it can be a wide variety of ages. We talk about it mostly on the older side of things, but it can happen at any stage.
So then today we're going to talk about reframing aging. So as you look at what you're saying, kind of that overall connotation, like what is the idea of reframing it? So you're saying I need to kind of be a little more conscious, but why? Like why is that important to people? And why is that important for all of us to kind of consider how that looks?
Well, as far as framing and reframing, um, it's something that we do every day on a daily basis. It's when we frame something, we are deciding the way that we want to talk about something. We may leave out some information. An example that I've used before is Guy Fieri, who is on Food Network, I think, and he has his Diners, Drive-ins, and Dives show.
Okay.
And 20 plus years ago, before he started doing his diners, drive-ins, and dives, if you said, I went to a dive last night for dinner, most people would kind of be like, ooh. But after his show, I mean, there are national tours now because he's reframed the way we think about diners or dives, and what does he say? He doesn't say, oh, well, maybe the ambiance isn't the greatest, or maybe, you know, the chairs are kind of old or mismatched. He talks
Mhm.
about the fresh food. He talks about the positives, you know, how
Mhm.
the you know, it's all made from scratch or whatever. It's the same kind of thing. It's how you talk about aging. And the important part is we are all aging. Every one of us is aging. From the moment we're born, we're all aging. And so this is something that I think is important to keep in mind too, because it's something that will benefit all of us, because hopefully all of us will get to the point where we are an older adult. And so we want to create a society and a world that's better for us than it is currently. And we can do that by talking differently about aging. And the thing, a lot of times when you ask somebody about, you know, what do you think about when you think of an older person? And they'll talk about the aches and pains, or, you know, I'm retired and I don't have any friends anymore, or something like that. Those things are true. But the other thing to keep in mind is there are a lot of positives that come along. I mean, think about the way that you were when you were in high school. Think about the confidence, the experience that you
Mhm.
those are things that I want to cling to and keep. I don't ever want to go back to being 16 again. I appreciate the fact that I'm the age that I am. And it's important to talk about those benefits. You know, you have those experiences that other people don't have.
Mhm.
You know, you have wisdom. There are a lot of skills that you gain as you get older. And those are some of the things that I think we sometimes overlook. And there can be a lot of implications. But I know we'll talk about that for later.
Sure. And so when I look at when I think about some of the words that come to mind for me, that maybe instead of using these words, like what would you use instead? So I noticed that you actually use older adults versus seniors, elderly, um, you know, like what impacts could that potentially have on just an individual when you're saying that? I mean, besides the obvious of respect.
Sure. Well, I think we need to keep in mind that language is ever evolving. It's really a living thing.
Mhm.
And so over time, certain words kind of fall out of favor. Certain words become associated with more of a negative kind of thing. And so there's actually been some research done that has shown when people see the word senior, they actually associate more negative attributes to the word senior than they do to the phrase older adult or
Mhm.
older Pennsylvanian, things
Interesting.
like that. So
Mhm.
that's one reason why I tend to try to say an older person or an older adult versus
Mhm.
a senior. It's not to say that you're being disrespectful if you call someone a senior, and a lot of
Mhm.
older adults call themselves senior. But over time, there's been more of a negative association with the word senior, and so trying to use something
So we'll start to see the older adult discount as opposed to the senior
senior
discount.
discount. Exactly, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So, anything else you want to share regarding reframing aging and that information?
Sure. There is a national center.
Okay.
This is a perfect moment where I could say I'm having a senior moment, which is one of those phrases that we don't want to use, and I'll talk about it in a minute. But
Okay.
the National Center to Reframe Aging is a national organization that's really focusing on eliminating ageism, and talking about the full picture of aging, the
Okay.
positives that come along with it, and there are negatives, but
Mhm.
there are positive and negatives to every aspect of life. So the National Center to Reframe Aging is the group that's really spearheaded a lot of the efforts and a lot of the things that I'm going to talk.
Great. So we've already talked about the words and the phrases that kind of come to mind. Is there anything else any other points you want to make around that?
Yeah. What I just said, having a senior moment.
Right, right,
What do you
right.
think of when someone says I'm having a senior moment? You think they forgot something.
Mm.
Well, being forgetful can be a component of aging, but it's seen as more of a negative. You're not saying, yes, I'm having a senior moment. It's more of a negative. Or saying she looks good for her age. People mean it as a compliment. But when you think about it, so if she wasn't her age, she looked bad. Like it's just kind of it's an odd kind of way of thinking about it. And I never thought about it like that either until you really do start paying attention to things. Another one is he's young at heart. That's another one that is meant as a compliment. But when you're looking at it, he's young at heart. You're associating a positive of being young with being active or vibrant or something like that. You would never say he's old at heart. So it's giving this idea that being young is better than being old. You know, she looks good for her age. He's young at heart. It kind of discounts a little bit the aging side of things. And I think that's something that it may not be intentional.
Mhm.
I'm sure it's not intentional, but over time you start noticing and it can really kind of bring someone down. And as a community, as a society, we talk about things in more of a negative way when we're talking about aging and
Mm. So, is there any research that's been shown as far as how with the framing of aging, is there any research that is showing like the positive outcomes of that? Is there anything that you can talk about to explain that a little?
sure. Well, there are negative aspects of ageism, and there are positive aspects of having a positive view of age. So if we start with the negative and then end with the positive, on the negative side, there are different forms of ageism. There's, you know, institutional ageism, things that are done, in organizations or kind of written into the policies, like mandatory retirement and things like that. There's interpersonal ageism that somebody is doing towards someone else. There's internal ageism that I have against myself. And a lot of us actually do. You say things in your mind like, oh, I can't wear that. I'm too old for that. That's an internalized form of ageism. All of those things can lead to a variety. One of them is depression. If you're framing everything about an older person's life as being negative and focusing on the negative, you
What's your obvious outcome for that?
yes, is
Mhm.
absolutely depression and things like that. Um, when people are depressed, they tend to have worse outcomes when it comes to health. People they may not recover as quickly.
Mhm.
And another part of that is when you have negative health outcomes, people not being as healthy, then you've got massive costs associated.
Mhm.
So it's important, from that aspect. And then on the plus side, actually, research has shown that if you have a positive view of aging, you you can actually live 7.5 years longer,
Hmm.
and not just longer, but more positive, healthier life.
Mhm.
It also, when you have a positive view of aging, it's been associated with delayed or a decrease in dementia. So there's a lot of positives to having that positive view of your own aging and embracing the positive views of aging.
So one of the things you makes me kind of naturally go to because I think about this and I see it in our line of work all the time is when individuals like you go to the doctor and your doctor's sort of dismissive around like, well, she's getting older, she's or, well, what do you expect? So and so, you're getting older and you're not going to be able to do these things. So those are kind of all forms is what I'm hearing
Absolutely.
of
And
ageism.
if your doctor is not paying attention to what you're saying and saying, oh,
Mhm.
she's older, she's gonna slip, that's another way that you can see health
Mhm.
decline.
So when you say that, expand on that just a little. I understand what you mean, but for our viewers, I want them to understand kind of exactly what you mean by that. As far as like how can that be impactful when the doctor's dismissive? Then what else happens? Like they're not accessing the necessary care. Like what does that mean?
Well, if the doctor's not, is being dismissed, if they're not listening to whatever concerns you, maybe they're not taking the time to explain what it is that you need to do. They're shoving medication at you and they're not explaining what needs to happen. Or they're not listening to you to realize that there's an underlying issue going on.
Mhm.
There are some parts of aging that we do see some decline, but there's normal kind of aspects of aging and there are abnormal parts of aging.
Mhm.
And something I just heard from a doctor I was just talking with, she said, in reality, the only thing that doesn't age really is cancer. Cancer is bad. Aging is a natural part and progression of your life.
Mhm.
If doctors aren't listening, or if you don't feel like you're being heard, then maybe you won't want to go to the doctor. Something that I've heard about too is, let's say you go with your mom and a healthcare professional, and I'm not trying to kind of be down on healthcare
Right,
professionals,
right,
but anyway,
right. But it's a reality of
yeah,
what
it is.
happens.
Well, and your mom's here and you're here, and they're talking to you and not talking to your,
Mhm.
and then does your mom feel like, well, they don't care about me, or maybe I am worse off than I think I am?
Mhm.
And again, that's another way that, they may not want to seek help. They may not ask the questions that they need to ask to be able to do what they need to, to be able to follow, whatever the recommendations are. And another part of it, when talking about not just the medical field, but even in sort of the long-term care, we call it, but living in a nursing home or some sort of congregate like group setting,
Mhm.
sometimes you'll hear people do something that's called compassionate ages or elders. And
Okay.
that's something where, and you've probably heard it.
Oh, let me guess. So elder speak is like, oh honey, you'll be fine, or something,
Yep.
dismissive in that way.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Dismissive. Or have you heard someone say, look at that cute old lady down the street, isn't she so adorable?
Mhm.
That's an adult person,
Right.
like I would never go up to you and say, oh, aren't you just so adorable? That It's a way of making someone seem like a child. And if you
Mhm.
make an adult seem like a child, you're treating them like a child, then that also is internalized. That
Mhm.
is something that kind of creeps inside, and then you feel less valuable. And if you feel like, well, if everybody's treating me like a child, maybe I can't do whatever it is.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is this isn't just something that we're talking about today to be politically correct.
No.
It's not. It's really just the impacts on people's feelings, the outcome of those feelings, and kind of it all, like you said, it creeps in. Like it creeps into sort of your subconscious, and it creates that sort of overall effect. So we have about 10 minutes or so left. So let's just kind of move on to a couple other things. We've talked about elders speak. Um, I guess I think the most important piece also is you talked about age strong and the power of words. So when we reframe some of that, like what are some of the alternative ways that you could give our viewers sort of ways to have those communications, but allow people to have that sort of feel like they're in power or that they do matter?
Well, one example, Age Strong, is an example that's actually in Boston. They had their what they called their senior transportation vans that they would
Mm-hmm.
take older people around, and they did a whole rebranding.
Mm-hmm.
And now in Boston, what it says on those vans is, um, we trans or here it is, transporting Boston's most experienced people.
That's great.
That's a way to kind of think about it differently. It's
Mm-hmm.
still for an older person to get that ride, but I'd rather climb on the bus that talks about me being one
More
of the most
experience.
experienced than the one that's just, the senior shuttle. I mean, even just when you hear it, you kind of sit up straighter, you feel
Mm-hmm.
more proud to say, yes, I am more experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a positive, and that is a good thing. So again, how we talk about something can make a huge difference. If somebody is, maybe they're not an older adult and they're talking about something that older adults may need. A lot of times we say they need this,
Mm-hmm.
they need,
Mm-hmm.
when in reality, like I said earlier, we are all aging.
Mm-hmm.
As we age, we may experience XYZ. It brings us in, and it makes people feel more like they should take a part in supporting older adults because it's we.
So this could even be potentially a strategy that maybe families could use when they are dealing with some of the older adults in their family, to be able to get them to see different things except medications, maybe additional needs that they may have in their home, and just really getting people to understand kind of better where they're coming from, and also show more of a respect. Do you
Absolutely.
agree?
Yes, absolutely. That respect is really important. And I think it's also important to remember that, yes, while someone may not be able to do what they could before,
Mhm,
they have that experience. We have that experience as
mhm,
we grow older. And think about the wealth, I mean, those intergenerational programs, bringing grandkids and kids together to,
mhm,
spend time together.
mhm,
It's also, we have a tendency when we think of older adults to kind of poo-poo what their needs are
mhm,
rather than actually listening to them and remembering, like, my dad was a, professional at whatever, accountant or whatever, and
mhm.
have continuing to embrace that respect. They still have so much to contribute. And another part of it too, maybe not so much for families, but if you think about um, some of the things that might be needed in a community, like for example, you have curb and there are curb cuts,
Mhm.
where it kind of goes down. So people, when you put a curb cut, it not only helps maybe an older adult who is in a wheelchair, but it also helps the parents who are pushing the stroller.
Mhm.
When we make changes to our environment, it actually is something that we can all benefit from. So when you're trying to do something to help an older adult, in many ways, you're helping your family as a whole connect with an older adult, listen to them, show that respect and that value, and asking them about their thoughts and their experience and not discounting it just because they're old.
Hmm. So, how did you become interested in this? Just for the last couple minutes, just sort of bring us back to what kind of pushed you to really start to look into this more and become trained in this?
I was at a conference several years ago where a woman representing that National Center to Reframe Aging, she was speaking about this whole idea of talking differently about how we talk about aging.
Mhm,
And the thing that really I really liked was that she started her talk out by saying, I mess up on this on a regular. I was raised in a very ageist society, like we all have been,
mhm,
but I'm working and I'm trying to do better. And so right from there, I felt like it was approachable to say, yes, I probably am going to mess up sometimes. And maybe I will say something that I shouldn't. Maybe I will say, she looks good for her age.
mhm,
The important part is to listen and start paying attention. And it just made a lot of sense to me that if you talk about the positives, what you look for is what you're going to find.
mhm,
If you're looking for the negatives in life, you're going to see the negative. If you're embracing the positive side of things and not shoving those to the side, but keeping in mind all of the positive value that older adults bring to our lives and our communities, it enriches all of us. And
absolutely.
it spoke to me
Mhm,
enormously. And if I'm perfectly honest too, I want my life as I'm aging to be better. I want to have a more positive view. I want to embrace my age. I want to have those 7.5 years,
mhm,
that they say, it's not exact, but the idea of being more positive about my own aging and other people's aging, I think it just elevates all of us and it
mhm.
shows that demonstrates that respect to all.
Great. This has been a really interesting topic. I feel like we could keep
Talk for
going for a
hours.
long time.
Yes.
Um, but I feel like you've given us a lot of just you've scratched the surface on a lot of information. So if individuals want to look up any of this and be part of sort of looking at this, or even just get a little more information, where would you direct them?
The National Center to Reframe Aging
Mhm.
has a website. It's called reframingaging.org.
Okay.
Um,
One big word.
yep, all one big word,
Aging.
reframingaging.org.
Okay.
They have some wonderful videos
Mhm.
that are really insightful and some examples of things that you can say differently um, and incorporate kind of into your lives. Really great information. They're on all the socials, the Facebook apps, and all of those kinds of things too. But I would really recommend going to that reframingaging.org as a first step because there's a lot of great.
Well, thank you so much, Rebecca. I know you're very busy. I know there's tons of things going on for all of us. And I would be remiss if I didn't tell everyone that Rebecca is a great leader for our aging community here in Pennsylvania. She is really well recognized, and I always appreciate her work and input. This has been a really great program for us. Just gleaming some important pieces here. Positivity, don't allow the creep to happen. Stay a little more conscious just about and it doesn't mean that you have to be sunshine and rainbows every day. I don't think that's what you're saying, but it's really more about just how do we approach these things and how do we work with individuals in these areas, because the better everyone feels, the longer they're going to be able to stay at home, the longer they're going to be more independent, the more you're going to be a more contributing person to our overall society. And that's really what we want as as individuals who work. Well, we are aging professionals,
Right.
but individuals that work in this field, that's always the big idea that we always want to look at, is what can we do to make individuals independent and give them a positive environment. So thank you so much for your time. Is there any one last thought you have for us, Rebecca?
Um, Really, honestly, it's embracing your age and all of the benefits and value that comes with experience. We gain experience every single day. And honestly, I'm proud to be my age. And I think we all should be proud to be our age. So, focus on those positives. Tell the entire story, not just one aspect.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us today. This has been a really great informative program. And if there's anything you need from our office, you can always call us at the Berks County Area Agency on Aging. We can talk about reframing aging. We can talk about other types of services or supports in the home. I encourage you all to call 610-478-6500, and we will see you next month. Thank you.